I want to lead with Derek Carr and the Raiders granting Derek Carr permission to visit with the Saints, something that is happening as we speak. Derek Carr is in Metairie. We spent a lot of time on this topic, but it's important. I think the Saints are at a crossroads at the quarterback position, and it's a crossroads that they haven't been at where they were actually able to make a move of this magnitude in a very long time. They tried with Deshaun Watson last year. That didn't work out. They tried with Jameis Winston. That didn't work out. And so this is the latest swing. Just to kind of recap, Carr has a no-trade clause in his contract, meaning that he can veto anything to any team for any reason. He has a trigger date of next Wednesday for $40 million in guaranteed salary with the Raiders. The Raiders are simply not going to let that happen. It's $32 million, just under $33 million next year, and another $7.5 million in 2024. So the Raiders are going to cut him if they don't trade him between now and next Wednesday. That begs a question, and we've gone through, do you like Derek Carr? Do you not like Derek Carr? We did a whole thing with Chris Rosvoglu yesterday. If you want to go back and listen to that, we did statistical comparisons on the podcast. If you want to go listen to that on Monday, it's on the Hanny Cast, 1045ESPN.com, or wherever you get podcasts. What I want to talk about now is why would the Saints trade for Derek Carr instead of just waiting this out for the Raiders to release him next week? And there's actually there's a couple of reasons that the Saints might want to give some draft pick compensation. And you know me, I hold on to draft picks like they're gold nuggets. Okay. So for me to say, hey, look, here's a good reason to trade a draft choice, I gotta be convinced. The first thing is, if you trade for Derek Carr, the Saints assume his contract. Now that means that they can restructure it, of course, and they would have to, because they're so far over the salary cap right now that they wouldn't be able to fit it in without that. But you would assume that contract with the ability to negotiate it, and you would not have to negotiate against anybody else. If Derek Carr hits the open market next Wednesday, I don't know who's going to bid on him. We went through the teams. There's plenty of them looking for quarterbacks. Carolina, Indianapolis, the entire NFC South. I mean, the number of teams looking for quarterbacks is not small. So if you were to trade let's say a third-day draft pick, a fourth rounder, a fifth rounder, a sixth rounder, a 6 and a 7, something along those lines, something that has some value to the Raiders so that they save face and they don't just let Carr walk, but not something so valuable as like, oh man, look, we're giving you a high second-round pick. And that's supposed to be pretty much a day one starter. So why you would trade for Derek Carr rather than wait for the Raiders to release him is competition. Simply, you want to box out the rest of the market. It also gives you the opportunity to restructure that contract in a way that is amenable to Carr. The Saints are not going to be able to trade for Derek Carr unless Derek Carr okays it. The Raiders have to okay it too. But I think the Raiders are willing to play ball. Other than, why else would they allow Derek Carr to go down to New Orleans? They figure we would rather get something than nothing. So if we get a fifth-round pick out of the Saints, then that's more than we're going to get if we just stand pat, tell him he can't go anywhere and visit, and next Wednesday we have to release him outright. The salary cap ramifications for the Raiders are the same, whether they cut him or whether they trade him. They take on a $5.6 million salary cap hit, but they free up $29.3 million in cap room. So one way or another, Carr's on his way out of Vegas. Why would the Saints give up a pick to do it? I just told you why. Does Derek Carr want to play in New Orleans? We'll find out after today. Is there a contract that makes sense? I said on the podcast that if the price for Derek Carr is day two picks and $40 million, which is what he is averaging on this current contract, $40 million a year, and you got to give him 5 years. Am I putting up $200 million, of which 60 or 70% of that is guaranteed, plus day two picks for Derek Carr? I am not. But if the price were, say, a fifth-round pick, let's be reasonable, okay? A fifth-round pick, maybe a 5 and a 7 over 2 years, something like that. To any combination of one day 2 pick in the 4th or 5th round or 2 day 2 picks over 2 years, I could probably swallow that and not gag. If the price on Derek Carr for next year is not, obviously they can't take a $40 million cap hit or even the $32.9 million cap hit. They will restructure it. They will restructure several other contracts, and they'll get this done. It would give you a going to be 32-year-old quarterback in his prime, hasn't been injured, hasn't had off-the-field problems. Now, I'm still scratching my head as to why he's available in the first place. We look at the two most apt statistical comparisons to Derek Carr, one younger by 3 years, one older by 3 years, and Carr's right in the middle, and those are Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins was much the same position with Washington that Carr is with the Raiders. We like you, but we don't love you. And they went along with this, they franchised him and they refranchised him, and hey, you like me now? And eventually they got rid of him. And by the way, been looking for a quarterback ever since. The Cowboys, went round and round with Dak Prescott for what, Taylor? 2 years on whether he was going to get contract extension or not. He finally did. He's their guy. The thoughts on Cousins and Prescott around the league are very similar to those of Carr. They are middle-of-the-pack quarterbacks. They're not elite quarterbacks. They're not bad quarterbacks. It's a big upgrade over what the Saints have now. Very interested to see what the Saints do with Derek Carr and what comes out of this situation. If nothing else, it would give you a young quarterback. This guy's not a bust. This guy can play. He's not going to go out there and fall flat on his face. Is he going to lead you to a Super Bowl? You're going to have to put some pieces around him. And I have just as many questions as everybody else does. Hey, how'd your numbers go down when Devontae Adams shows up? That was supposed to be your guy. He shows up, your numbers go down. Well, it was Josh McDaniels' fault. Much as I'd like to lay all this at Josh McDaniels' feet because I don't think he's a very good coach, I can't ignore the fact that Jarrett Stidham threw for 365 yards against the San Francisco 49ers the day after Carr left town. So there's a lot to chew on there with Derek Carr. His visit is going on today.